All right, we are live. I'm going to go ahead and add in our friends over there on Facebook and on Twitter, and then we are going to get underway. Lots to get into here on the show today. All right. We are live on Twitter, and now we are live on Facebook. Good evening. Welcome in. Happy Tuesday, February 3rd, year of our Lord, 2026. Welcome in to the Falcons Podcast. I am your humble host, Garrett Chapman. Give me a follow at GChapATL on Twitter. Stay fully up to date on everything that we have coming around over there on Falcons on SI, especially on a day like today. We have a ton of information to get out to you. So make sure to give me a follow there. You see that right there in the caption right here. Big thank you to everybody who's following, jumping along, jumping in, whether you're doing it live or maybe you're coming in after the fact. Either way, make sure to like the video, make sure to share it with your friends, make sure to, just get them in here on this Falcons discussion. But tonight, we got another big show set up for you. Takeaways from Ian Cunningham. He was just introduced as the new Falcons general manager. Plus, we're going to talk a little bit about this evolving coaching staff. I'm going to tell you why I'm actually really excited about this group. And I think that Kevin Stefanski has just continued to hit a couple home runs here for the Falcons moving forward into 2026. But the takeaways from Ian Cunningham, that's going to lead off the show. But as always, I am going to take your questions. If you have anything, if you were live here in the show, make sure to drop those in here. I like to answer as many of those as I can. But if you want to make sure that yours get pushed straight to the front of the line, make sure to hit those super chats. That's the best way to support me, to support this channel, and to make sure your question gets answered. So that's just pretty good stuff. But thank you. Welcome in. Very excited to get underway. Trenton, he hits us up over there on YouTube, says, G-Money, just tapping in to say, let's freaking go, get freaking set. 2026, we back, baby. I know it's unknown, but I got a feeling we will be good. No, great. Well, I love that. I love your optimism there, Trenton. Look, after today's press conference, I came away very impressed with Ian Cunningham. I was thrilled with what I heard from him, and again, I'm going to get into some of that here in just a little bit, but I've come around to Kevin Stefanski. I was a bit lukewarm at first, but the more of these hires keep coming in, I'm going to tell you why a little bit later in the show. I'm in. Now, it's not the question of what the staff looks like. It's not a question about what the front office looks like. That's not really necessarily the stuff that I'm most worried about, I guess, moving into next season, and why I'm not quite as on board with the 2026 success as you might be here, Trenton. But the questions at the quarterback position are pretty substantial. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. We have to stay rational about that side of things, because the Falcons are not in a great spot at quarterback. We're not. And it's just not the way that it's going to be. And that was one of the things that I took away here from this press conference today. I guess we'll start there. Matt Ryan was specifically asked about that. And Trenton, thank you for your question or your comment. He was specifically asked about his commitment to Michael Penix, and he was non-committal. And look, I get it. I understand why that's going to be the case. It's a young quarterback who's, not necessarily young in the prototypical sense, but he's going to be 26 by the time next season kicks off, and he's going to have 12 games of starting experience. That's not young anymore. And he's going to be more than halfway through. I guess, check your watch. He's over halfway through his rookie contract, at least his guaranteed rookie contract. We don't know if he's going to take off and get a fifth-year extension to get that pick up his fifth-year option. We don't know if that's going to be the case yet. So the Falcons have a lot of decisions they have to make. I think the big one, obviously, is Kirk Cousins. That one has effectively already been made. He's not going to be an Atlanta Falcon. I can pretty much put that in pen right now, right in Sharpie, more or less, at this point, just because of the way they've restructured his deal. But Michael Penix might get some competition. Matt Ryan was non-committal. Stefanski was non-committal. Of course, he comes back and he praises some of the physical traits that he has and his ability to hit any pass on the field and everything else. But the best ability is availability. And we don't know when he's going to be available. So the Falcons are going to have to find other options. They're going to have to figure out what they can do. And then if they've painted themselves into this corner already before we're just a couple of days into a full regime fully being put together, then you're already putting yourself behind the eight ball. Because what happens if they go and sign? I don't know. Let's look at some of these quarterback options the Falcons could have. They got Zach Wilson, Jimmy Garoppolo, Kenny Pickett, Tyrod Taylor, Mitch Trubisky, Marcus Mariota, Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Malik Willis, and Daniel Jones. I'm just going to go ahead and say that they're out on Daniel Jones. They're not going to pay what his expected AAV is going to be, about $40 million. That's just not going to happen. I'll just be very clear about that one. But then the number shoots way down. Malik Willis is about $10.5 million, but he's going to probably want to go somewhere where he's going to be signed up as a starter. So probably not here in Atlanta. Maybe he's willing to do it. Maybe that's why they were non-committal, because they were going to tell Malik Willis that he has a chance to come in and compete for a starting job on a team that's a playoff viable franchise. That's the difference. If he wants to go to New York, sorry. You want to go to Cleveland? Sorry. You're probably not competing for much of anything at a place like that. If you come to Atlanta and you win the job, all of a sudden you can be competing in your hometown for a really good, a really strong season. I don't think it's going to happen. I've said it on this podcast several times. I'll stick by my guns there. Aaron Rodgers is either retiring or he's going back to Pittsburgh. Russell Wilson is probably not a great option for here. Maybe he could. Joe Flacco is one that I've thrown around a little bit. Marcus Mariota is not coming back here. Mitchell Trubisky, fine. Whatever. Tyrod Taylor, solid pro. The options aren't great. The options are not great. And these are all projections too. So these are all coming from Spotrac. These are not my opinions, I guess, on the matter. This is just what Spotrac is putting out there. I see someone said, Ashen Rogue says, I'd say Willis asks for 20. He might ask for 20. He's not getting 20. I don't think that's going to be the case. She means Dolby says Gardner Minshew would be a good fit. Maybe. He also could be coming off of an ACL injury. It still remains to be seen just how significant that injury was. We don't know. We don't know that officially yet. Shy Boogie says, hello, Falcons family and friends. Go Falcons. What's up, my man? OMT Studio says, this dream of being confident is starting to feel real. I do think that there was some level of competency up there on stage today. And I'm not going to disparage the last regime. I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do that. I'm not in the business of doing that. I might cover those guys again. You never know, but I am not in the business of putting people down. I don't really aspire to be that. But as far as what I saw from the guys today, I was impressed. I really was impressed. I liked what I saw. Cunningham's never been a general manager. So I mentioned before, the big question is quarterback. It is absolutely a question of what Cunningham does while he's the primary decision maker. I think he was more involved, just based off of some reports that I've been seeing and things I've been hearing. He was very involved in this rebuild up in Chicago. And that gives me confidence that he's going to be able to come in and make decisions. Gives me some confidence there. But again, we don't know because he hasn't been a general manager. We can't know. We can't know what he's actually going to be yet. Not yet. Trenton comes back and says, man, it's a shame the game has changed. Penix is in great shape. There was a time young quarterbacks waited 3 years to play. He's got meaningful reps and starts and is still young. We saw 2 40-year-olds win games. Yeah, he's got time. I'm not giving up on him. Trent, I want to be clear. I'm not giving up on Michael Penix. It's just the Falcons have to be realistic because if he's not going to be healthy and play, then you've got to figure something else out. You have to have a plan B. You cannot go into, and look, I said this with Zach Robinson. My biggest qualm with the Falcons last season was that they had no other options for play caller. They had no other options. So when everyone was clamoring and saying Zach Robinson needs to be fired, then I would always counter and say, okay, and hire who? What are you going to do? There's nobody else on this staff. That's the biggest difference between, I think, that regime and this regime. This one, I think that they're going to make sure that there are plan B. There are plans B and C and D, because that's how the NFL goes. You have to be able to adjust and change it up a little bit. And that's something that the Falcons weren't able to do last year, and it cost them football games. King Fred says, I can't wait to see Penix take off under Kevin. I can't wait. I think it's a great matchup. I really do. And just because he was non-committal doesn't mean it's not going to be a great relationship. I actually do think the pairing of Michael Penix and Kevin Stefanski are fantastic. I love the way that it could potentially be. And all this talk about this going under center versus pistol versus whatever, I think it's a bunch of hogwash just in general. Michael Penix, he plays quarterback in the NFL. He can figure out how to go line up under center and take some snaps. You talk a lot about the comfort level. I went back and read through some of Zach Robinson's quotes and Raheem Morris's quotes and stuff like that. But I never got the feel. I mean, they said it was something with comfort level, and then it goes to Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins dramatically improved, not improved, but he increased the number of snaps that were under center and stuff like that. But I think a lot of that is a bit of a red herring, just in general. It's just the offense wasn't performing, and that was the anomaly, and that's what people pointed to. And I think that's kind of where everybody just started pointing fingers and went from there. But we'll see. We'll see what actually ends up happening with it. But Michael Penix and Kevin Stefanski, I think, could make for a fantastic pairing. I'm excited to see what that looks like. But you got to have a plan B. You need to have something else that you can point to. And I mean, going up and down this list, like it's not awesome, you know. I mean, maybe you want to get a Kenny Pickett. Not really. Jimmy Garoppolo, still only 34. Zach Wilson's 26. I mean, most of these guys, you either go for the affordable young guy. That's probably what they're going to end up doing. But again, it completely depends. Randy Paynes says, great hire for sure. Ian Cunningham. Yes, tremendous hire. And I want to get back into some of this discussion. And look, I'm going to get back into your comments and everything else, your questions, everything like that. In just a minute, I want to get through some of my thoughts here. But if you have any super chats, anything that you want to drop right straight to the front of the line, that's the best way to make sure that your stuff does get heard. But I'll try to get to as many of these comments as I can. The biggest thing here, though, my big takeaways, I guess. First was, of course, Michael Penix, just being non-committal in general. But it's also a homecoming for Ian Cunningham. He talked about buying his first pair of dress shoes at Freeman's Shoes downtown. How they have a brick at Centennial Olympic Park. About how he was this husky kid dancing in his kitchen doing the Dirty Bird. Watching Jamal Anderson and Bob Whitfield and Chris Chandler and the Atlanta Braves do all the things that they were doing. I mean, he's up the road in Roswell, so he was here for a couple of years. I don't know how long he was actually here, but I would imagine if he was here 95 to 96, 97, maybe he was 10, 11, 12 years old. You know, those are formative years. He says he was a Falcons fan. I'll take him at his word for it. He moves to just outside of Dallas, Texas. So I would assume he had some kind of affinity for the Cowboys in the 90s, you know, but ultimately it is a homecoming, and he's decided he's leaning into it, and I'll take him at his word for it. And, you know, he talked a lot about how he wants to bring some of that energy, some of that fire back to the Falcons organization. And he talked a lot about how the city was just on fire, about how much passion and energy there is. And I love that. Those are all great words. And you talk about winning an opening press conference. I mean, that's a great way to do it. You get fans on board. You just relate to them as best you can, which tells me something good about Ian Cunningham. But then as far as the team goes, I mean, I got something in my eye. Good Lord. Stefanski and Matt Ryan. So you have these press conferences that are a week removed from each other. And Stefanski and Ryan, they mentioned being tough and physical, specifically tough or physical, 10 separate times. He mentioned it another 5 times today. And look, that makes a lot of sense. You've got, he joked there are 2 guys from Philly. My goodness, I got like an eyelash in my eye. I don't know if that's ever happened to you guys. I guarantee you it has. It is the worst feeling. Ugh. But you talk about being tough. You talk about being physical. You talk about just putting together a team that's built from the trenches inside out. I love that. Those are great words. Great words. And I think that the idea that the Falcons can come in and be tough, I think they're close to that. And I think that's a mentality. I think that they've got tough players on this team. And you build around guys like Jake Matthews and Matthew Bergeron and like a Bill Callahan, who's now the offensive line coach, and Caleb McGarry. Those are tough guys. Lindstrom, killer. I mean, you got tough guys in the middle of this field, and you build from there out. And that gets me excited. I love the idea You're not just this finesse organization. Like the Falcons have felt kind of like a finesse organization for a long time. That felt like it's changed in recent years. But again, I mean, I liked the idea of the mentality of this team and how it feels aligned. It feels like there's a common vision. And I think that's as important as anything else, because you can use whatever adjective you want, right? But the way you talk about it and the way you hire those guys, I think that's something that you have to keep an eye on. And that's really what I've seen, the themes of what they're saying. The words may be different, but the theme is the same. And I love the aligned vision, but also the different perspectives of how to get to that goal. And that comes from Matt Ryan. And that is something that I didn't feel before, but wasn't really looking for, if that makes any sense. I wasn't looking for that kind of vision, that kind of thought process, because anybody talks about vision, everyone talks about it. But how often are they actually on the same page? Because in the last regime or in previous regimes, you talk about the collaboration side of it. Collaboration is going to be a thing. Collaboration is always going to be a thing. Like Stefanski or Ryan, they can go into Ian Cunningham's office and talk to him about it. But Cunningham's going to be the decision maker. Stefanski can have an opinion, but Cunningham's going to make the decision. And that's something that feels pretty clear. But they're striving, they're pulling in the same direction, and I think it was something that I took away. And it's something you can't really put your finger on. I'm trying with this, the use of certain words and the way they're looking at things, but ultimately it's something that's going to be proven. And he said as much. He said, I got to prove it. I've got to prove it. And he's exactly right. For a franchise who hasn't been to the playoffs since 2017, hasn't had a winning record in that time, you got to prove it. You got to win over this fan base. You got to win over the organization. You got to prove it. Not only to the fans, but you got to prove it to the other people on that staff. And he says the way you do that is just through discipline to the process. Discipline to the process. And I like that fact, because far too often this organization would go big game hunting and try to go, you would not throw away necessarily, but you would trade assets for that big fish. You'd go draft a tight end 4th overall instead of Penei Sewell or something like that. So building from the interior, getting a cornerstone of your franchise, and instead you get the shiny toy. This tells me, from what I've heard from Cunningham, that this is signaling that the Falcons are going to be a more disciplined franchise. And I like that fact. But he also talks about how this team he was asked effectively if this team was close to potentially getting in and achieving the things that they think they can. And because you've got a Super Bowl team who's in their first year with a new head coach, second-year quarterback, who potentially a finalist for MVP. And he said a few times that the cupboard's not bare. Falcons are talented, but there is room to improve. So he doesn't want to tie himself into it, say like, oh, yeah, we're talented. We're not going to rebuild. We're not rebuilding. We're retooling, right? That was a common sentiment from the last iteration of this franchise. And there weren't buzzwords. There weren't little phrases. There weren't little things like that. You're talking about a process and getting after it that way. And I loved that. And I really took that away. The last big thing here, you talk about the lessons that he's taken along the way. 14 years or whatever with Howie Roseman and Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta. And then he goes to Chicago with Ryan Poles. All of these stops, they've equated to 5 division titles, 2 Super Bowls, and a consistency of winning. Before he goes to Chicago, he made the playoffs in 10 of 13 seasons. Then he goes to Chicago and he leads the Bears through a rebuild, gets them back to where they are today, and they won their first NFC North title since 2018. And it wasn't in a bad division either. That was a pretty damn good division. You had 4 legitimate playoff caliber teams in that division. And he talked about the way that they did it. And he was a decision maker. He was somebody who actually was dealing with trades and everything else. And he ran lockstep with Ryan Poles. And they build through the trenches. That's how you do it. You draft, you develop, and you retain draft picks. Those are currency. I wouldn't really be surprised to see the Falcons trade back. And you talk about the steps along the way. You get a guy who learned draft strategy from Ozzie Newsome and Eric DaCosta in Baltimore. Best player available. With Fox 5 afterwards, he sat down for a personal interview, and I went back and listened to a little bit of that. I saw a clip on social media, and he said effectively that he'd be a dog chasing his tail if he drafted for need. Go get the best player available. Because if you draft for need only, then all of a sudden you're coming around the next year, and now it's a need. It wasn't a need then, but now it's a need now, and maybe this player's not quite as good. No, you go get the best player available. You draft the best player available. That's how you make a team filled with the best players available. And then he goes to Philadelphia, and that's where you learn some cap strategy. Because in terms of cap compliance and creativity, Howie Roseman's pretty damn good. People have referred to him as a wizard. I was reading Front Office Sports. That was quite literally the way that they described him, as a wizard of the salary cap. And you compare that to what the Falcons have been doing. They've been pretty conservative. $20 million in deferred spending this year. I think Jesse Bates was really one of the only big ones in terms of deferred spending. And it can be aggressive. Like, you don't need to go be what the Cleveland Browns have been, because you can see how badly it worked out for them. Just they deferred so much money because they thought they were right there with Deshaun Watson. But the Eagles are also extremely aggressive with this. You don't have to be that aggressive. And Cunningham clearly said that. He doesn't want to, quote, mortgage the future for the now. He wants to avoid some dead money. He wants to be creative with how he attacks the cap. And then you go from draft strategy in Baltimore to cap strategy in Philly to rebuild strategy in Chicago. Turns 5 picks into 10 in year 1. He hits on a lot of these picks, and the Bears are back in the playoffs. That's the general manager. That's it. That's why I'm excited about this guy. That's why I think that this was a great hire. That's why he was the slam dunk hire going back to January 7th, when he was the first and only person that the Falcons requested to speak with. They didn't request anybody else. And that's also has a lot to do with Kevin Stefanski and them realizing that, hey, this guy is the big fish. We need to go get him now. This needs to take priority. And they had no competition. So it happens a little bit slower than maybe they expected or maybe they wanted. But I think they got their guy when it was all said and done. Because you can talk about the relationship between Ryan Poles, and I wanted to ask this too. They didn't have time before the press conference finished up. But you talk about the relationship that already existed between Matt Ryan and Ryan Poles. And Ian Cunningham is that perfect little middleman. Poles is going to tell Matt everything that he knows. They trust each other. They rely on each other. They lean on each other. Poles is going to tell him everything. And it tells me that the Falcons made a slam dunk hire, and I'm thrilled about it. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it all comes together. But now you got to prove it. And we're not going to know here for a while. It's going to be a minute before we fully understand if this is a slam dunk hire or not. But the next big decision that comes in a couple of weeks, just over 2 weeks, around Valentine's Day ish. That's going to be when the tag deadline comes up. They're going to have up until March 3rd to make that decision. That's the big date you need to know is March 3rd. But then free agency starts March 9th. And that's when you can start doing your negotiations. You can start doing your extensions, stuff like that. What do you do with Caden Ellis? What do you do with Thea Alford? What do you do with Kyle Pitts? Then free agency starts for real on March 11th at 4:00. And that's when it hits the fan, man. That's when it hits the fan. And that's where we're going to figure out a whole hell of a lot about this Falcons team and what they're going to look like moving forward. Then you get to the draft and everything else. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited. I think it's going to be very interesting. All right. I'm going to jump back into some of these comments. Some of your other comments of stuff like that. All right. Robert Archer says Terry's downfall was quarterback drafted. You're alluding to Michael Penix here, I'm assuming, but yeah, maybe. You can also talk about Desmond Ridder and some other guys who just did not pan out necessarily. But Michael Penix the jury's still out, man. That guy's not far. He's far from a finished product. Just whether or not he can stay healthy. That's what it all comes down to. Dossier Gaming, it's the get effing set. Yeah, Matt Ryan, the quote of the century. Get freaking set. I love that. Dossier Gaming says, do you see anyone being trade bait for picks, or do you think Ian will just trade back? It's hard to know in terms of their roster evaluation. As far as insider information, no. I mean, it's not. He's been around the team for 3 days. He was asked a couple of times about how he evaluates things and how he looks at certain players, and he said basically the same thing every time we asked him, and then it just never got brought up again because he said the same thing every time. He's only been there for 3 days. It's he's still trying to figure out where things are. It's like all this other stuff, and he's just trying not to say anything that he doesn't need to say. I'm sure once the NFL, the draft, the combine comes around, then I'm assuming we'll have a chance to talk to him then, or maybe we'll hear something from him. And at that point, maybe he'll have a better answer for people. But as far as trading players, I mean, maybe I don't know. I don't know yet. I mean, who are you going to trade? And it also depends on what kind of timeline they see this team having. I don't know necessarily how many players you would have that are going to fetch you something that's big time. I mean, unless you're trying to trade Bijan Robinson or something, or Drake London for the final year of his deal, which, again, I don't know if you're going to do that. It's just the way the NFL works, or doesn't work, really. You don't see people trade players for picks all that often. I mean, it happens. It happens, of course, but I mean, shoot, we just saw it with Sauce Gardner, Quinn Williams. I mean, guys like that. I mean, you see it happen. But no, I do think that he will trade back. It would not be all that surprising because the value is not going to change all that much from where the Falcons are picking in the second round to where they'd pick a little bit later on in the second round. It's not going to trade all that much or change all that much. And they need assets, man. They need depth on this team so badly because as well as Terry Fontenot did last year in the draft, Falcons still struggled with depth. They really struggled with depth. And you saw that when you had some offensive line injuries. You saw that in the secondary when some injuries hit you there. You saw that specifically at linebacker when you had to lean on J.D. Bertrand. I think you just kind of got screwed with Troy Anderson and you didn't really have any other options, So I do think that the Falcons are going to be trade back candidates. That's going to make a lot of sense. But you also need cheap, affordable deals, because you're not going to be able to pay everybody if you're going out and making big acquisitions in free agency. I've been putting out all these articles about free agents, and we'll talk about that coming up here soon. Now that we have a general manager, we have a head coach, we know Matt Ryan's here. Now we can actually start looking at some off-season discussion topics, but free agency, of course, being one of the big ones. But you don't, if you have to draft well, That's what the Steelers do so well. That's what the Ravens do so well. That's what these top organizations do. The Patriots have drafted well. That's been the big thing for them. The Rams have drafted really well. That's why they jumped right back into this. You talk about the Seahawks. They've drafted really well. I mean, you have to flesh it out and go get some good guys in free agency. But again, that's all going to be stuff that's going to evolve, and all this stuff is going to just continue to build. And we'll see how he actually does it. He talked about drafting and retaining talent. That was a big theme there for Ian Cunningham. But until we actually see him do it, remains to be seen. Trenton comes back and says, I love the continuity across the board from blank down. I think that will produce more than some high-profile coordinators. Everyone having the same vision of what we want to accomplish. #identity. #identity. Yeah, I like that. And I think that was a theme. And whether or not they were intentional about that, I bet they were. Because that was something, clarity and all of the other things that they learned from ZRG, who was that third party that came in and kind of evaluated the organization. Thank you for the comment there. Lack of clarity was a big one. That was a big one. And that's something that I think that this new regime is really taking on the next step and trying to build that. And maybe they got coached up. Maybe they got some talking points. I don't know. But it seemed like they were on the same page. Dossier Gaming comes back and says, Ian saying how you don't trade the future for now felt like a slight dig to Terry. It was not a slight dig to Terry. I didn't take it that way, at least. Maybe if you did, I see what you're saying. But look, the Falcons thought they were in position to win big last year. They did. That's what they thought, because that's the only reason you make a trade like that. You go make a big time trade because you really feel like you're ready to go. And ultimately you weren't, because you leveraged too much the quarterback position, and the way that was handled was less than ideal. I still think that, I said this on the podcast, if Kirk Cousins, and look, and I say this, this doesn't mean I'm off the bandwagon with Michael Penix. But there should have been a quarterback competition last summer, because if Kirk Cousins, because that makes Michael better, it makes Kirk better, it makes this team better, but they wanted some unity and they wanted this team to be all aboard on the Penix train. And maybe there was some slight resentment towards Kirk. I don't know. I don't know how that was, but it was a mistake in hindsight that there wasn't a quarterback competition last summer. Because if you had Kirk Cousins playing down the stretch in the early parts of the season and then again down the stretch, I'd say that team probably is in the playoffs. It's not a dig at Michael Penix. It's not at all what it's intended to be. It's more just a fact that Kirk has played in the NFL for a very long time. He's not going to have a lot of those same growing pains that Penix did. And then maybe we're talking about a different situation here. But I don't want to say it was a dig at Terry necessarily. Maybe it's a philosophy that the Falcons have had for a long time. Thomas Dimitroff had the same strategy. He was often very, very aggressive in going and trading up for players that he wanted. He did it regularly did that. So ultimately, I think that, I don't know. I didn't take it that way. That's all. But thank you for the comment. Thank you for the question. Dirty Bird for Life comes over and says, I feel like Ian Cunningham was a steal. He's young, has a lot of experience in winning organizations, and he's from Atlanta. He's not technically from Atlanta. He just spent a couple of years in Atlanta. He says he grew up a Falcons fan. I'll take him at his word for that one. But I am excited for it. I am excited for this one. I think that this is a good situation here for the Falcons. I think that ultimately this is you go get a guy who's touched a lot of winning organizations. I don't think there's a perfect formula for finding a general manager necessarily. It's just a lot of trial and error. And I mean, because you're not going to go find a guy who's been a general manager generally. That's not normally how it happens. But if you find somebody who's touched winning a lot and he's had his fair share of input on those winning organizations, I think that's going to set you up for the most levels of success. And look, if the Falcons had hired James Lipford too, I felt like he was another very qualified person for the job. Ian Cunningham was the favorite, though. He was a favorite for a long time, and I think that ultimately there was a reason for it. And Falcons got their guy, and I'm excited about that. Dacia Gaming comes back and says, I think if Ian was with us last year, we wouldn't have let Dahlman walk. I think in hindsight, the Drew Dahlman decision was not optimal. But the Falcons were strapped for some cash. They thought they had somebody in Ryan Newsel who was going to give them a high enough floor. And look, Newsel is affordable. I think there's a chance that Newsel sticks on and he remains the starting center just because the Falcons don't have a ton of assets. I'm going to start doing some mock drafts where the Falcons trade back, by the way, and just see what that looks like. But I don't think that that's a fair assessment necessarily because we don't know. We have no idea what he would have done. Now, he does go to Chicago. They do go pay him, and he does have a Pro Bowl season, and he plays well, And who knows what he would have looked like here in Atlanta, but that's a little bit too revisionist for me. But ultimately, this is it's impossible to know. But different decisions may have been made. Who knows? Dahlman may never have been drafted here in Atlanta if he was here. Who knows? Michael Ronquillo always hits it with the heart. Good to see you, my friend. Alex Jacinto says Terry had the best drafts in franchise history. Yeah, no, I'll give Terry full credit for what he was able to do last year. I will my big detriment for it. And look, this is again, it's having your cake and eating it too. You didn't have a lot of picks. And some of that's because your starting quarterback ran his mouth a little bit, and you lost picks. You traded some picks. Some things worked out, some things didn't, and you were also aggressive and you leveraged the here and now, or you leveraged the future for the here and now. And look, I'd go back and do it again. James Pierce was a fantastic acquisition. He was strong. Jalen Walker, I think, is only going to get better. Billy Bowman, I mean, granted he got hurt, but he was fantastic. Xavier Watts, shoot, man, he was second in the NFL in interceptions. Falcons had a great draft class. I'm not going to fault Terry. Terry also had some bad draft classes too. So you take with the bad with the good and you move on. Terry, I think, is going to get a second chance to go be a general manager, and we'll see what he does with it. But Terry also had a lot of whiffs. And it was one of the big reasons why this team struggled with depth, because your general manager – he went for the top end players, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But at the end of the day, this team was outside of the playoffs every single year that he was the general manager. You didn't have a single winning record, and that has to matter at some point. OMT Studios says, I don't think the Falcons will make major moves. I see them trimming fat at the most. I expect a lot of familiar faces for the first season. See what you have in Penix before you use up future money. Yeah, I see that. Because you don't want to leverage everything that you have into the quarterback that you may not have moving forward. I could see them potentially. I don't know as far as that goes. I mean, quarterback was their biggest weakness. I don't think your future quarterback is on a free agency market. You're not going to trade for him necessarily. And this isn't a great quarterback class. I think what you do, and OMT, I'll give you credit for this because this is kind of what you're alluding to, and I'm going to go with it. If this is what the Falcons do, I think it makes a lot of sense because you could see what you have in Mike. You don't go all in necessarily, which, I mean, they may not. But then you would potentially trade up, maybe draft with your own pick, who knows, in 2027, and which figures to be one of the best quarterback classes ever. Should be one of the very good ones. Let's just put it that way. It's very, very good. And it's deep too. So you'll find some really quality players throughout that class. Then maybe you find your next quarterback. That could be a viable option for the Falcons. And then that's when you gear up and start putting things together. Until you figure out the quarterback. I mean, this is the NFL. Until you figure out the quarterback, you're literally wandering the wilderness looking for water. You do not know your next step until you figure out the quarterback position. That's as simple as it gets. So if Penix turns out to be the guy, jackpot. You're done. You're off to the races. You can go figure it out. Let's go see what we can do, right? If he's not, then you got to figure it out. But to your point, you don't want to over leverage necessarily in other places. But on the flip side, you can still build up an elite defense. You can still build up an elite offensive line. You can still build up a great wide receiver core. Go pay Bijan Robinson, bring in a good back to help preserve him. You want to make the roster as good as you can to be a little nest egg there for your future quarterback or for Michael Penix. So you can have your cake and eat it too with this one. And it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like this isn't the NBA where you tank for picks and other stuff like that. And that's not kind of the situation that I see the Falcons in necessarily, but I do see your point. No, I'll see that to you. Tanner Jones 1230 says, how long until he starts actually making moves? Well, the soonest he can make some moves, franchise tag, that's the next thing he can do. And he's got one of those. He could potentially franchise tag, like, I don't know, Caden Ellis. I don't think that's going to be the case, but you could franchise tag Kyle Pitts if you wanted to, but that's the biggest thing. Transition tags, you can do tenders and stuff like that. First, second, right of first refusal, all that other stuff. All of that can start being done here in a couple of weeks, middle of February, and then we'll see him down there at the NFL Combine, and that's the biggest thing. But the money moves, those will be coming in March potentially. Michael Baxter says, good evening, Garrett, and everyone over at Falcons on SI. Good evening, Mr. Baxter. Good to see you, as always. Let's see. Bashripok. Sorry about that. It says, we still will not win the same dog and pony show 2 years from now, back to the drawing board. That's a bummer. I hope you're wrong. No, I mean, who knows? We don't know. Give this guy a chance. We'll see what he can do. Halsey says 2025 draft was not better in year one than the 2016 draft. Yeah, sure. It's a hard comparison to make. I mean, that 2016 defense, that team in 2016, I mean, Deion Jones and Grady Jarrett was 2015, but Keanu Neal was in that class. You had some really good players, but one of the reasons why, Halsey, that class was so good is because Matt Ryan was your starting quarterback, and Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and Kyle Shanahan was calling plays, and Taylor Gabriel was there, and Devonta Freeman, and all these other guys, Tevin Coleman. Your offense was scoring 33 freaking points a game. It makes your defense, your pass rush, pretty effective when teams are desperately dropping back and trying to throw the ball. that helps a lot. I mean, that's the thing. It's not a zero-sum type of situation. So 2025, you had a defense that was, I mean, you had a guy who was second in the NFL in picks. You had the rookie who led the NFL in sacks. I'd say that was pretty damn close. The 2016 team, I mean, they helped them lead the Falcons to a Super Bowl. But again, thief is the comparison is the thief of joy. Is that what they say? Both of those classes were pretty damn good. Let's hope the 2025 class is a little bit more staying power, though. Tassia Gaming says, I absolutely would do it again. Watts with Pierce for that trade is worth it considering what's in this draft class. Yeah. No, look, I mean, look, we don't know what's in this draft class yet. I'm still in the early phases of kind of doing deep dives and looking in at this group, but again, it's impossible to know what's in each draft class. I know people have said there's a generational quarterback here, and then this guy's a can't miss prospect, and whatever, and sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. Time will tell. But we can do our best. We can look into it. My early thoughts are there are some really damn good players in this draft class. You look at like a Mekhi Lemon, you look at Carnell Tate, look at the wide receiver position in particular. There are some killers in this class. And I think we're going to look back at this and say, wow, this is a pretty damn good class. And you talk about Caleb Downs and guys like that. Not that the Falcons need a safety, but whew, that dude's a killer. Baby Driver says, I expect a revamped offensive line and better receiver corps. Well, they don't necessarily need a revamped offensive line. They need a refurbished one, potentially. You're going to have the decision coming up on Bergeron at left guard, but that's not one that you're going to have to make right now. Left tackle is a future problem, just in terms of the age of Jake Matthews. It's going to be something you have to address at some point. Right tackle, Caleb McGarry, that's going to be something that you have to address, but those guys are making way too much money. You're not moving off of them. Right guard, I mean, obviously you're not moving off of Lindstrom. I'd say the only position, aside from depth positions like swing tackle or something like that, the only thing that you're probably going to upgrade is center. But even then, Ryan Newsell's making $2 million or something. It's easy money to move off of if you wanted to. It's not going to be a lot of dead money. So if you wanted to go get it in the draft and Jake Slaughter or something like that, I think that'd be a very interesting option. He's one that you can get potentially in the second, third-ish round, maybe a day 2 pick, but depends. It really depends on what they want to do and what other moves that they make in free agents, or excuse me, on this own team before free agency, right? Like, do you cut Darnell Mooney? What do you do defensive line? I mean, like, you have some other positions that you really need to go into. And I'd say that they draft at least one wide receiver. I would be stunned if they don't draft at least another wide receiver, but you're going to have to add another one in free agency anyway. You're going to have to add a veteran. You need veteran talent in this group. And offensive line doesn't necessarily feel like it's at the front of the line for me necessarily. That's for me. I would like to see some, but that's not the top of the list right now. That's not the thing. When you have 5 draft picks coming up, I don't see left tackle necessarily being a priority for them right now. I can see that changing, just not right now. Baby Driver continues and says, I also expect them to sign Tyler and sign Caden. Caden Ellis, I do expect them to re-sign just because you've got Ulbrich, you've got this familiar system. He had a great year. I would expect Caden Ellis to be back. Tyler Algier, I do not expect to be back. He could, because he's familiar here. It's going to be, obviously it's going to be a different system. And I could see him really doing well potentially in this Stefanski scheme. But he is a wide zone back. That's something that's worked out really well for him here in Atlanta. But he may want to go to a system that's going to be like that. He may see the Falcons adopt more of a gap scheme. We'll see. Again, that's another we'll see. I need to patent the phrase we'll see. I say that. I've said that probably a dozen times here on this podcast today. But no, Tyler Algier I believe, has played his way into a starting contract. It's just he's got some competition on the open market. If I just say he goes to New Orleans, I think he'd be great in New Orleans with Kellen Moore. I think he'd be great potentially in Dallas. Javonte Williams, he only signed a 1-year deal. Algier might command a little bit less, and I think that could be a really good option for him there. Maybe he goes wherever Arthur Smith goes. He's going to be an open. Well, actually, no. Arthur Smith just went to Ohio State. Shoot. Never mind. He's not going back to college. This isn't the Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team, So I expect Tyler's going to go get starting money. Is the only point I'm trying to make. It's just I just don't expect it to be here because he's going to. But if he comes back, $7-8 million, I think you could potentially get him for. That's my expectation. But I think he wants to be a starter. I think he wants to give himself that opportunity. Trenton Houston says, yes, Terry did good this year, but we didn't have a backup, not from the practice squad at wide receiver, tackle, linebacker, corner, defensive tackle, even at center. We would not have a plan B. That's a big fat F for Terry. Yeah, that's my biggest point here, Trenton. That is my number one point is he did well at certain positions, drafting at the top end. The starters that he was able to get at some positions, he was great, but he had a lot of whiffs too, man, especially in those early years. You're talking about, we forget about Richie Grant. We forget about Troy Anderson, who's now officially going to be moving on. Like Arnold Ebiketie didn't really necessarily put everything together here. He showed some flashes, but struggled with injuries and consistency. And then he lost playing time. Those are all second round picks. And none of them are going to be signing second contracts with the Falcons. That's not good. It's not good. And it crushes your depth, and when you're not getting contributions from Braylon Trice, and again, Trice is injury related. It's not necessarily fair to blame Terry for that, but you drafted the guy. So it's going to come back to the general manager. But you have a lot of those. There are a lot of those, far too many of them. And one of the reasons why this team did not make the playoffs, despite having good play most places. You had a defense that played pretty well, but when you lose Divine Diablo, this team fell apart. The defense went, you went 0-5 in the games that Diablo didn't play a full game. 0-5. That's a pretty bad indictment on the depth of your defense. Baby Driver comes back and says, it seems like they would keep Kyle Pitts, but because Stefanski knows how to use him, but you could get valuable picks for him. I think you would get a compensatory pick for Kyle Pitts. I believe that would be the case, but I love Stefanski and Kyle Pitts and the fit that you would have there. I worry about the price tag. It could get up there into, if you're going to get him for $9 million, $10 million, maybe, I think then at that point you can consider keeping it. But if you're talking about $15 million plus, then I struggle to see it. I just don't think that the Falcons are going to want to do it. And if you franchise tag them, I think the most recent number that I saw from Spotrac was $16 million. Oh boy. It's just because you got to keep in mind that Drake London's going to be on this contract. You're going to have to pay him. You're going to have to pay Bijan Robinson. Yeah, a lot of guys, and that's like one of those reasons why I just don't see them signing Tyler Algier. Because if you sign Tyler Algier for $8 million, then you're definitely not signing Kyle Pitts. That's just the way it goes. We got a super chat. I'm always going to jump straight to super chats. Big thank you to CBRN10 over there on YouTube. Says, I know it's early, but I think Ian is way more the real deal than Terry. What do you think? I do. I'm actually a big fan of the hire. And less about Terry and more about Ian. I think he's touched a lot of winning organizations. I think he has been very involved in every facet of an organization. You talk about the levels of these things. He goes to Baltimore. He learns from the best, probably one of the best drafters that the NFL's had over the last 25 years in Ozzie Newsome, right? That's step one. Then you go to step two and you go to Howie Roseman. You talk about the best guy with the cap, the guy as far as the rules don't apply to Howie, right? And then he goes and rebuilds the team and turns them back into a bona fide playoff contender and NFC North champion for the first time since 2018. 1, 2, 3. Hits all of them. It's all of them. And I think that is impactful. And you talk about Ian Cunningham coming in here and being impactful. I think that's why I'm excited about that. But big thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate you. I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to take a couple more comments. Voice is running a little dry today. I'm trying to get back to where I was here. But yeah, big thank you for the super chat there. Halsey says, a year ago, 2026 was supposed to be the arch sweepstakes. Yeah, these things change constantly. They constantly change. Our sweepstakes are going to be 2027 now. So again, you may have some major risers. I mean, you've got a great quarterback class. What we presume is going to be a great quarterback class. To your point, Halsey, it presumably is going to be pretty deep, and you got some dudes. You got some serious dudes in that class, and I think you're going to have several quarterback options that you can look into and potentially use, and a lot of different types of quarterbacks too. This year's class is a little weak. I mean, Fernando Mendoza is fine; he's a good player, but you're going to start seeing some comments about him, and he's going to dwindle down, and they're going to figure something else out of whatever. They're going to keep you hooked here for the next couple of months. But he's not Trevor Lawrence. Like, he's not Peyton Manning. He's not Andrew Luck. He's not a guy like that. That's really the only thing I'm saying. Because those guys were number one. Matthew Stafford was the number one pick, and he was the number one pick for the entire cycle. That's not what Fernando Mendoza is. He will be the number one pick probably for this entire cycle, barring some change or some evaluation, some medical. Impossible to know that, but I don't see that happening. I just don't compare him to those players necessarily. Robert Alcorn says, I'm not ready to give up on Penix. He needs to work on his footwork and throwing motion. He does. And I'm not ready to give up on Michael Penix either. He's shown the ability to be a Matthew Stafford type when it comes to arm strength and his ability to just place the football. He's also wildly inconsistent at times, and his accuracy has struggled, and a lot of that comes back to his footwork, and sometimes his reads have been not great, and sometimes, look, there are a lot of different things for it. He drifts a bit. Sometimes if his first read isn't open, which far too often it wasn't open, he would drift around and then he would potentially move into pressure, or maybe he needs to step up in the pocket. Like, there are things that young quarterbacks have to deal with, and that stuff happens. It's called they're growing pains. You have to learn how to do it and figure that kind of thing out for yourself. My only thing, I don't question his talent. I don't question his ability to play the position. I only question his ability to stay healthy, because this league will kick your ass. It'll spit you out. It'll spit you out if you let it. And I get concerned that he can't stay healthy. And you talk about the great talents in the league, in all sports. You can look at any sport. There are some immensely talented players who never fully recognize their potential because they couldn't stay healthy. I'm not saying that's what it's going to be, but shoot, man, he's had 5 season-ending injuries. 5. 3 of them have been on his knees. Got to play a full season, and that's why this 2026 season is paramount for him. He has to have a strong performance, but I'm not giving up on him, not yet. Baby Driver says that Jennings guy is the offensive line to get, but he will probably go first round. Yeah, probably. I think so. Robert comes back and says Stefanski is a better coach than Morris. We'll see. I think he is too. Says hi. Those are a lot of M's, man. Says, what are you talking about? Talking about the Atlanta Falcons. Ian Cunningham. Talking about the new generation of the Atlanta Falcons. Welcome to the show. OMT Studio says at least Penix isn't Josh Rosen. Yeah, thank God. Robert comes back and says Falcons have to draft a space-eating defensive tackle. I love the idea of getting a space eater, man. There are some really good ones in free agency. That's a position that I think that the Falcons should absolutely go spend some money on in free agency. Go get a veteran. Go get a veteran space eater, somebody you can just drop it in the middle and just go. Because you've got some great talent there with Rukororo, and you talk about Brandon Dorless. Those two are great. Look at one. Zach Harrison's one, the defensive end, but he's a big dog, and he's going to play in that little outside spot, but that 3 tech. But I'd say that you go spend some money in free agency, go get that guy there. That's what I would do right now. But I do think that drafting somebody else on the defensive line would be wise. Gabriel Rogers says Cunningham said best player available, not need. Who knows what position the best available is going to be? Yeah, that's one. It's impossible to know, because your first pick is going to be coming in the second round. You can project pretty effectively up to 15, right? That's what the Falcons picked last year. But even then, who the hell in their right mind, nobody thought that Jalen Walker was going to be available at 15. Every draft that I saw him, I had him going top 5. Occasionally, you saw 6, 7, 8, maybe even a 9. No one had them dropping out of the top 10, much less dropping to 15. I mean, we can project this as much as we want. And then projecting all the way to the second round, shoot. Whew. That's why I'm a fan of trading back. If you have a dance partner, if you have somebody who's willing to work with you there, trade on back. Get some assets, get some swings, get some bites at the apple, Talked about that. Cunningham talked about that being currency. Make that a reality, please. But no, he did say best player available. It's like going for need is like chasing a tail, being a dog chasing its tail. Don't be that. Don't be that guy. Abel ATL says, I was encouraged to hear him talk about how important the trenches are to a successful team. Spoke about not mortgaging the future for the president. Seems like he has the right priorities for the team. And that comes from winning organizations. You talk about the discipline, the commitment to the process and not getting, like all those things. And that was something that I felt Terry was lacking at times. Early in that regime, you had Matt Ryan as your starting quarterback. You had a team that wasn't, it needed a reset, right? You needed to turn things around. I felt like that was pretty clear at that point. Julio was on his way out. I mean, you had you had some dead money that you really needed to get off the books. That's when the Falcons needed to kind of throw it all, just toss it out, toss it in the trash. Let's hit the reset. Let's go back to business, go back to work. And they didn't do it. They didn't do that. And they mortgaged the future as a result. They wanted to go win right away. And it hurt, because then they kept trying to retool and then instead of rebuilding, and it hurt them, and you look at a team who effectively was on the same timeline as the Falcons were. The New England Patriots, that's where they were. They were not anywhere close. I mean, Brady had left. They got to a spot where Belichick was on the way out, and they were just like, all right, screw it. We're going to hit the rebuild button. And they did. They rebuilt for a minute or two, and now they're back in the freaking Super Bowl, and I hate it. But at the same time, it's a great organization, and that's what great organizations do. Sometimes you have to know that it's not your time. You have to figure something else out. Falcons didn't do that because the Falcons were in the midst of that, and instead of hitting that rebuild button, they're like, let's go trade for Deshaun Watson. Like, what the hell are we doing? What are you talking about? And then Matt gets traded, and then you go get Marcus Mariota, and then it's like, hey, we're going to hand the keys to Desmond Ridder. There are a lot of bad decisions that were made. And then he also drafts Kyle Pitts. Oh, and speaking of this comment, Dirty Bird for Life says Terry Fontenot drafted Kyle Pitts at number 4. Yeah, he did that at the same time that he was trying to go and get Deshaun Watson and all this. Well, that was 1 year removed from that. But he signed bona fide backups at quarterback Mariota. Heineke drafted Desmond Ridder, signed Kirk to $100 million guaranteed, and drafted Penix immediately after a failure. You didn't make the playoffs. You didn't have a winning record at any point in your career here in Atlanta. I don't think anybody can describe that as anything but a failure. And again, I'm not going after Terry. I'm not going after Raheem. I'm not going to go after Arthur Smith, nothing like that. That's not the point of this podcast. But I heard something different on stage today. It was something that I was encouraged by. Baby Driver says excited for free agency. I am too, because that's my next big day of content, and I'm really excited for that one. Halsey says Cousins had a larger cap hit in 25 than Darnold and May combined 24 and 25 by Terry. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you sign a quarterback out of free agency instead of draft him. Darnold was one of these refurbished players. Drake May was a 3rd overall pick, and he's going to be a steal here for the next 3 years. Dude was a bona fide MVP candidate, and now he's playing in a Super Bowl. But Darnold's his story is awesome. I love it. All right, I'm gonna take a couple more comments, and then we're gonna call it a show. Dastia Gaming says, I hope Penix can learn to pick up the blitz better. Yeah, that's something that, again, that's all young quarterbacks. You got to learn how to do that. That's going to be an important thing. And guys, I also see reminder. I see we got 100 plus people or so here in the pod today. Make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. If it's your first time over there on Twitter, make sure to hit that follow button. Just click, make sure you're following, because we got a lot of content that comes out there, and that's a really good way to stay up to date on everything. But big thank you to everybody who's jumping in. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, make sure to, which we got a people over there on YouTube, make sure that you're subscribed. Just takes a second. Just click the button and make sure. A couple more questions here. OMT Studios comes back and says, when in doubt, draft a dog. Yeah, well, I don't know where they'll have a chance to draft a couple of them. There will be a few there. We'll see if they can do it. Maybe a Zachariah Branch or something like that. But I'd kind of want to see someone who has a little bit more downfield acumen. But if Zachariah, I can see Zachariah potentially dropping. And if Zachariah Branch drops, that's when you jump on a guy like that because he has some game-breaking speed. You haven't seen a lot of his downfield stuff as much, and that's what kind of concerns me a little bit. But you're gonna have a chance to draft some Georgia players. I mean, I don't think that's the priority necessarily, but I understand we got a lot of dog fans in here. August 89 says, could Bates be traded for a pick? Jesse Bates, yes, I think so. Yeah, I mean, he's on the final year of his deal, I believe. Let me make sure. I think this is the last year of his deal. Oh, I'm in a bad gateway. What the hell? All right, yeah. So 2026 is the final year of his deal. Theoretically, yes. If you did do that, I mean, he's got a pretty large number. So if you trade him with a post June 1, you would get $14 million in cap savings, and your dead money would be 10.75. But that's one of your voided contracts, right? So I talked a little bit earlier in the show about Howie Roseman and how they were going to have void years and stuff like that. Jesse Bates is one of the only guys on this team who has those void years. So you have some of those that have been kicked back. So you're going to be paying for him regardless. But if you traded him pre-June 1, your cap savings go down to 6.5 million, and you have a lot more dead money. So you'd have 18.2 in dead money. So it doesn't make a ton of sense necessarily to trade Jesse Bates. It's going to be pretty expensive, and he's just, pretty damn good. He's coming off of another all-pro season. I don't necessarily see that being the case just because the money is not going to be great for you. Because you're paying him. His cap number right now is 24.7. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to cut him, or not to cut him, to trade him. But good question. It's an interesting question. I know that some people have thought about it. Just depends on what capital you get. Like if you're going to get a second round pick, which I don't think anybody's sitting a first or second round pick for Jesse Bates necessarily, but if you get that, then I think you'd have to at least consider it. But I just don't think that you're necessarily going to do that. Also, he says if you go after Arthur Smith, your FedEx packages won't arrive. Well, I'm a UPS guy, so this is Atlanta. Come on now. Avian Terrell. Avian Terrell, of course, the brother of AJ Terrell, plays for the Clemson Tigers. If he drops to the second round, then I'd say, which again, you have that profile picture, man. I've seen you, Mr. Copeland, again. I don't know if I can show that profile picture whenever he makes a comment. But Avian Terrell, I think he would make some sense only if he drops in the second round. I mean, again, you're not trading back up into the first round if you're the Falcons. You're not trading back up in the first round. Yeah, I would prefer to see this team potentially trade back. But if Avian Terrell's there, I think he's a first round quality talent as of right now, and we'll go from here. But we'll finish with this one here. Trenton, of course, always has so many great questions. Says a good question for you, G Money. Do you know when the Falcons will hold another press conference? It's going to be a minute. I know I'm going to have a small break here from press conferences. I've been sitting in so many of these damn press conferences, Trenton. I've had 4 in the last month, which is a lot. That's a lot of press conferences, especially when they're all like an hour long. These aren't short ones like I do during the regular season. So we're going to have, gratefully, I'm going to have a bit of a break, a reprieve there from those. But you're going to hear from, probably the next time we hear anything from him is going to be the NFL Combine, the scouting combine in Indianapolis. That's the soonest I would say that you speak to anybody. But after that, man, shoot, OTAs, stuff like that, all that stuff's going to open up there. And when we get out closer to the draft, because you have a new head coach, you're also going to have some added practices. So it's going to be a little while before they actually come back and really say much. Chris, I want to answer this question. I know I said this was going to be my last question. That's a good question here. So do we need to re-sign London and Bijan Robinson the same year? No. But Bijan Robinson is going to command close to $20 million, I would say. So he's going to be a very, very expensive contract. And it's going to be a staring match, him and Jahmyr Gibbs. So both guys are drafted in the top 15. Both guys in the same draft class. Both have their fifth-year deal that's been picked up, the fifth year of their deal, the rookie contract that's been picked up. Drake London's going to command somewhere in the range of $30 million. B is going to carry somewhere around 20. They're going to be very highly paid people. And I would not be all that surprised if Bijan Robinson's number continues to go up, especially if he comes out and has a season like he did last year. Shoot, man, you may be wise to try and get ahead of it, because the difference when a Bijan Robinson and maybe Christian McCaffrey even, Saquon Barkley, a lot of those guys, a lot more of their production comes on the ground. Bijan, a lot of his production has come in the receiving game. So he doesn't, he's still electric on the ground. He still takes the ball 15 to 20 times a game, but he's also going to add in a couple more catches than those guys, So it would tell me that it'll tell me that his longevity might be there. Because he plays a little bit more of like that slot receiver and he bounces around a good bit. So Drake is going to be a free agent next offseason. Drake London is the priority right now. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Chris. Very kind of long-winded here. I've been talking for 70 minutes. But Chris, Bijan Robinson is not necessarily the priority right now. You would pay Bijan if you think that his number is going to go up. You would pay Bijan now if you think that he's going to be here anyway, and then you're trying to get ahead of something. He's resetting the market, whatever it is. So, Halsey, I see you said, Gibbs ain't Bijan. Maybe I'm biased. You're right. I think Bijan Robinson is the best running back in the NFL. Bijan Robinson will set the market, whatever it is. However, if Bijan signs first, Gibbs will set the market. Whichever one signs first is going to be the lesser paid. Just the way it is. It's the same thing with Trey McBride signing for like $1 more or whatever to the tight end market. These guys, it matters a lot to some of them. Maybe Bijan doesn't want to take that gigantic money. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's going to get paid. Especially at a running back where you're not going to command 50 million, 40 million, whatever it is. But Drake is a priority to re-sign. That's what I'm trying to say. Drake needs to be re-signed this offseason. He needs to be extended this offseason. But Bijan is one that I think could potentially wait till next year because you still have him on the fifth-year deal if you don't go and get a deal done. All right. That's fun. I really appreciate you guys. And great questions. I had this whole second part of the show that I was going to do, but y'all's questions were fantastic. And Ian Cunningham, obviously, it takes the cake, and that's going to be the important thing. So when we do our show on Thursday, make sure to tune in for this one. We've got a potential reunion here for Jeff Ulbrich on the defense. We've got a lot of offensive experience. This offensive staff is fantastic. You got to wait till Thursday to find out why. I will tell you all about it. So make sure to set a reminder on your phone to tune into the podcast Thursday night, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, not 8 o'clock. I don't want to say 8 o'clock. Probably because I'm looking at the time now. But no, tune in at 6 o'clock. We do this every Tuesday and Thursday. So big thank you to all of you guys. Big thank you to the hundreds of people who've jumped into this podcast, whether you're on Twitter, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on YouTube, no matter where. I can't do this without you guys, without the support from y'all. So thank you for doing it. Thank you for being here. And thank you for continuing to support the Falcons podcast with Garrett Chapman. And until next time, go Falcons.